This conference will now be recorded.
Well, this is one of those
Great.
webinars that I've been really looking forward to it for a long time. And I just appreciate everybody attending here on it today. And I want to kind of give a little bit of a background here of how I met Roian Atwood from Wrangler Jeans. I think it was about 2 years ago in St. Louis. I was there for a Soil Health Institute, I guess you'd say, at a conference. And I remember seeing on the program that this guy from Wrangler Jeans was going to speak. And I honestly, and I'm not sure, Rowan, if I've ever told you this, I honestly thought it was a motivational speaker. I just thought, what's Wrangler Jeans have to say about cover crops? And I thought, well, this will be interesting what this guy has to say. And so it wasn't long to realize, oh, okay, you could argue he's a motivational speaker, but it was totally different than I thought. And actually, Rowan, you did very, very much motivate me. But the fact that I heard that Wrangler Jeans was actually interested in soil health and cover crops, I was just like blown away. And because I've been preaching this message for years and years and years, and never had a we'll just call it a large entity be able to promote cover crops in a way that I soon grasped this could really be meaningful. So, Rowan, that's how I'm going to introduce you. I'll just say too that you invited me down to your group there about a year ago, I guess it was, and it's a good to see what you're doing there in your headquarters in North Carolina. But hey, thanks so much for joining us today and spending a little time with us. So talk to us a little bit about Wrangler's doing in the context of cover crops and soil health. And go ahead, take it away.
All right, great. Thank you. My pleasure. And I do have a couple special guests, as Steve mentioned. Michelle Lovejoy with North Carolina Soil Foundation is here, has joined us. We have Rod Snyder from Field to Market. We'll also have him chime in as well because we want to share a little bit about the field print calculator that we use. Sorry, Steve, I invited all these folks I forgot to mention.
That's okay.
And even David Miller.
No problem.
He's with the North Carolina Cotton Producers Association, and we've been working on some projects as well. So
awesome.
I'm glad to show up in full storm. And what Steve was referring to just last year, we do host this annual conference here, either at the Wrangler headquarters or just down the street at one of our research parks, specifically on land stewardship practices, where we put a focus on cover crops, conservation tillage, and rotation for the FFA, for Future Farmers of America, the youth. We do get out some ag students who don't participate in the FFA, some 4-H students if their parents will let them come. So we just finished that third annual conference this past Saturday. Poorly planned with the holiday, but it's a continuation of our effort. Wrangler's been supporting FFA for more than 50 years. It's a long-standing partnership, and it's something that we really value to continue to work with the youth on. So I just have a few slides. I want to breeze through some of them kind of quickly and then get to the heart of some of the cover crops. As a large brand, as a major entity, a global apparel brand, we face a lot of critique every day on how we operate in the world, whether it be our manufacturing practices and where we manufacture, labor, and a wide variety of issues that you can imagine. And occasionally we get this question about where does your cotton come from? How's it grown? And those advocates have a strong point of view about supply chain activity and the way that nutrients end up in waterways and the way that agricultural land is practiced. And so inherently in there is a conflict, is a challenge, is a people challenging us or challenging society. And as we know, as we have to produce more food in an increasingly growing population with all the constraints of climate, weather, profitability, insects, pests, rising costs, land prices, that these are just additional concerns that we have to mitigate and be aware of. And we kind of took some of our original lessons before we met Steve around from nature, from range management. We were looking at different practices that were going on grassland management and how some of the the adaptive multi-paddock grazing or use of animal management was really adding some value back to nature systems, bacteria, fungi, mycorrhizal biology, how having a grazing period. And if you think about Wrangler was created in 1947 as a gene for that person in the saddle, right? We were learning about how that person who we developed the original gene for was managing their future impacts more sustainably. And what we learned was better grazing periods for the grasses, better recovery time. And we were inspired by this, and we asked ourselves, can we apply this to cotton growing systems? Because that's really our number one material input that goes into our product. That's what we have to be responsible for in our supply chain, to be considerate and conscientious of the stakeholder critique and the issues. And of course, the answer was yes, you can do these things. We came to learn that the secret is in the soil. And we met folks like Steve, we met folks like the Soil Health Institute, where we first met, the Field to Market Tools, met our local Cotton Producers Association, David Parrish and Michelle Lovejoy, and we're started on this learning journey of what does this mean to be a good land steward? What does this mean to protect soil? And cover crops was at the epicenter of that discussion. What we did is we looked at research. We simply said, let's evaluate this from a science perspective. Frameworks aside, certifications aside, all the critique aside, what does it mean to be a sustainable row crop producer, a sustainable cotton producer? How can we define sustainable cotton for ourselves as a brand based upon the research? And our first attempt was at that was a science paper that just said, what is the potential? And we got really excited. We looked at 47 different scientific studies. We relied heavily on the NRCS and some of our folks there who helped provided us with the data, helped us interpret the data, who validated what our key findings were. We asked the Nature Conservancy to look at the economic benefits, because they had a lot of great information about economic benefits of cover and rotation and complex rotation. And then we went on to write a second paper about, what's really valuable to us as a brand is the idea of data, of having data. It sounds so sort of benign when I say it, but getting to this authentic representation of sustainable on-farm practice is exactly what we need to have the confidence to put in front of consumers in a meaningful way, to say, hey, we stand behind this. We stand behind our supply chain. They're not negatively contributing in the way that you might think. As a matter of fact, we're positively contributing. And that was the key conclusion of this report. The first report, the science report, was that cover crops, conservation tillage, complex rotation, 3 crops in the same field over a 5-year time frame, that those were the 3 sort of super important, super valuable things that we wanted to have in our cotton growing systems. We want our cotton growers to be growing other things, peanuts, if you have sandy soils, sorghum, corn, soybeans, whatever that might be. Now, we had to also recognize that in some markets, there's a limitation to the number of crops that can be grown. So in some cases, we had to adjust that expectation. But the science did say that it was the complex rotation that had the most benefits from that. And of course, the use of cover. And what are those benefits? What we learned was that for a grower that was to use all 3 of those combination of practices, the crop rotation, the conservation tillage, no tillage, and the use of cover, that ultimately allowed them to sequester 3 times as much carbon out of the atmosphere where we have an excess, and drive it into soils where we have a nutrient deficiency, where we can make it available for plants and all the benefits that come from having a nutrient-rich soil environment. And when we think broadly about how widely these practices are adopted, conservation tillage is one of those practices that is widely used and scattered throughout. Most of my presentation here, and as you can imagine, are focused on the 17 cotton growing states. And we're growing cotton in Oklahoma too nowadays. But you can see here sort of the rates of adoption by land acreage. This was some of the things that the data shared. When it came to cover crops, what we found was there was a much lower adoption. Now, again, this is acres planted, not necessarily farmers adopted. We chose to use this metric to kind of take a land view and wanted to have it consistent. But I shared these numbers with David Parrish, and we had a really interesting conversation. I'd like to introduce him briefly and And Steve, if we could allow him to open up the mic there.
Yep.
David and I met.
Go ahead.
Yep. Let's see.
It's on you, David, if you can hear me.
Oh, there he is.
There it is.
Hi, David.
I'm here. Hey, Rowan.
Awesome.
Hey, how are you? Good. So, yeah, David, you why don't you just introduce yourself and just some, we had a pretty aspirational and inspiring discussion, in Stanley County at the let's see, not Newbies, it was that with the Burlinson farm, where we were talking about the potential of the use of cover crops in the Southeast, but North Carolina specifically.
Yeah, thank you, Rowan, and I won't take up much time, but yeah, I told Rowan I was a little surprised when I saw that number, the 6%, but regardless, it does show that at least in the Southeast and in particular North Carolina that we are, I guess, ahead of the curve, but I thought there was a lot of room for improvement in that 6% number, and I can say for certain that over the past couple of years, and really a lot of it has been driven by brands and retailers, in addition to Wrangler, but many other ones are driving this, sustainability message, specifically in cotton, but it has become a much bigger topic of conversation in the cotton industry, not just in North Carolina, but really in the nation. I was just at a meeting a couple weeks ago out in Dallas, Texas, with the American Cotton Producers, which is part of the National Cotton Council, and a good portion of the meeting was dedicated to the program that the National Cotton Council, along with Cotton Incorporated, is putting together to address this issue and really we feel like we're doing a pretty good job when it comes to sustainability. There's obviously room for improvement, and soil health is a big part of that. But we're actively putting together a program to really document what we're doing and where we're at, and really the improvements that we can make for the brands and retailers. If you're not familiar with it, it's called the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol. In addition to the National Cotton Council and Jesse Daystar, who is their VP for sustainability, he was hired a couple years ago. The National Cotton Council has recently created a new position, and as of, I think it was January, their sustainability, and I'm sorry, I forget his name and exact title, but he is working to develop this protocol, this system that's going to be put in place to provide the necessary information that brands and retailers, are looking. But yes, we're here in North Carolina. We're working directly with NRCS and Wrangler. We've got a project right now that we're excited about. It's using heavy rye cover crop and rolling it down and planting cotton in the spring. And certainly that's nothing new, but sometimes it takes just getting out there and doing it. The idea has been around there for a long time, but we feel like it's got a place here in North Carolina, and we feel like we've got the right people looking into it and working on it to really give it a fair shake and see if we can get some adoption and get that 6% up and make improvements. So I'll end with that. Rowan, thank you for the time, and if anybody's got any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Great. That's awesome. Thanks. Yeah, and we have Michelle on the line too, so we're going to talk more about that project of ours in just a moment. So just to kind of sum up that research report and just what we found, this is the quantifiable data. There was 3 major environmental benefits that came from the use of no-till, cover crops, and crop rotation. You can see them listed here, and it was pretty humbling, pretty amazing to think that it's not just the carbon sequestration using soil as a carbon sink, but we have better water infiltration, we have better water retention to help growers in times of both flooding and droughts. And in our own process and moving away from research as we started to work with growers in different regions, this has become pretty pretty interesting to see. Like we think we get a lot of rain here in North Carolina, and we do get a lot of rain, 60 inches on average a year. But to go to, say, Western Tennessee, where they get 80 inches or more a year, and speaking with Eugene Pugh from Halls, Tennessee, he uses a radish cover to kind of create that. It rots out, but to create that chasm, that ability for the water to infiltrate back down into the water table, it was pretty impressive stuff to see the wide variety of cover crops that were being used. And that kind of got us excited about partnering with North Carolina Foundation for Soil and Water Conservation and North Carolina Cotton Producers Association. And I believe there's another trade group on the soybean side as well that was involved in this project to demonstrate the benefits of a high residue rye cover crop. And if I could just introduce Michelle Lovejoy real quick, she's Executive Director at North Carolina Foundation for Soil and Water Conservation, and she helped engineer the project and got us on board. Michelle, can you unmute yourself?
There we go.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. Just very quickly, my organization is a nonprofit that's been around for about 20 years now, and we primarily look for ways that build conservation capacity within our state, and our prime partner on all of our projects is that local soil and water conservation district. And we have some other cover crop initiatives that we've been working on with Cotton Incorporated, but through some meetings, some of our folks met Rowan, and we saw an opportunity here. And also with talking with David, and Rowan was right, the Soybean Growers Association is also a partner in this. We knew it was a good time in North Carolina to start exposing producers to the benefits of heavy rye. They've seen some real good crop yields in some other states in soybean rotation, but we didn't have any data in North Carolina, and our farmers, they like to see what comes off the research farms, but then they really want to see it working on a working farm. And that's what this initiative is set up to do. So we've got 4 different producers that we're working with that planted fall of last year, and we'll have a round of field days September of this year. And they planted 10 acres of cereal rye in a field that's in rotation with cotton and soybean, because it's a common rotation for us. And they had the opportunity to do a broadcast seed or to no-till drill it in, and then 2 weeks after planting to do a 20 units of nitrogen application. And so now they're just past the April 15th date, so they're in different stages of termination. Some are doing roller crimping, some are doing a chemical burn down. And our extension agents, the NC State level specialists designated to the cotton area and soybean area, they're the ones that are doing our data collection. So Dr. Rachel Vann, Dr. Guy Collins, and Dr. Charlie Cahoon is also looking at some pest issues. So they go back to that local soil and water district and that farmer and collect some of the field data. And then we'll have a little bit of time this summer to do some analysis. And then those field days are also going to wrap around our bigger cotton field day that David's group puts on each year. So that's where we are with this. I'd be happy to take any questions. I will also say one of the requirements that we started when we started doing cover crop demonstrations is all of our sites have been entered into the field to market calculator. And that was a requirement of Cotton Incorporated when we first started, and it just made sense to continue that as we partnered through with Wrangler. And the really neat thing about that is, we've got a database where all the data is sitting, but it's also allowed that local producer and that local extension person and soil and water district person to get exposed to what some of these online tools are that may become more prevalent in the future. And we get a lot of really good feedback on some things in the early versions that still needed to be worked on, and so we passed those along to our contacts as they worked through the process. I hope that's what you're looking for, Rome. Was there any other details you wanted me to provide?
No, that's just perfect. Thank you. And Michelle was actually here just on Saturday, so we've been working busily to promote cover crops. She was doing the rainfall simulator and some of the other activities to help educate the youth on the use of cover and the use of good land stewardship practices. Thank you, Michelle. One thing that I've been learning too, I don't know if I'm going to get this right. I have the luxury of not being involved in ag. So one thing that I've come to appreciate, and Steve, you can help correct me if this is incorrect, but just is it allelopathic nature of this heavy rye residue? Keeping that seed germination of the weeds down, and the opportunity that's presented with such a cover is pretty exciting. That gets me excited.
Yeah, it is, and you even said it right, I believe. That's a hard word to remember, to pronounce, but we have actually, I've done webinars on that in the past, so it's certainly something that can benefit your cotton rotations, that's for sure.
That's great, and I'll just put up the dates. Let's see, the next slide here at this build. If you are in the region, these are the dates for the field tours of the actual trial plots and the on-farm plots that Michelle and David are both working and being a part of. So just to continue on a little bit more, I'm kind of a sucker for the science and really get excited. This newest report that came out recently got a lot of people excited about the translocation, the movement of soil carbon down into layers further down, giving almost increased viability to this idea that we can use the soils as a carbon sink. And I think there was just a lot of excitement, because if what this report and what this newest science is saying is true, then the opportunity for using cover, for using land stewardship practices to create a meaningful change to global issues is even greater than thought before. When I think about the life of a grower and all the ways that data intersects with the grower's environment, whether you have a farm management system, whether you talk to other growers, whether you have crop advisors, NRCS, participate in forums like this with Steve, ag retailers, crop buyers, things that come off the tractor cab, or maybe even drones in the future, or maybe today. There's this ecosystem of data. I mentioned something that has become increasingly important to us is the ability to view and look at that data to create authenticity with the way that things are being managed. And so one thing that we've done in our evolution of our program is we've partnered with a really important group, a group that has a responsibility to ultimately guide the metrics to be able to allow us as brands to have a communication across the supply chain and industry. And that group is the Field to Market, the Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture, which Rod Snyder is the executive director of. And what that means is, and I want Rod to chime in here as I show these spidergrams. Well, what this means is that growers are inputting data into a software platform that gets pinged over into these metrics, and we can look at the overall value of those sustainable practices. So the screenshot here is just the dashboard where one of our growers, there's 5 growers that we have in our portfolio that we've expanded. We've gone past science, and we're now interacting with growers and saying, hey, what is possible on farm? What is meaningful? And what is meaningful from your practices standpoint? And how does that result in real world impact? And so this is a screenshot of that view that a farmer would see, the year, the crop, the field that they're entering for. And you can see here the planting prescription, the fertilizer prescription, spraying, how many tractor passes are going through. And ultimately this module is geared towards cotton, but you choose other crops and it toggles down. And so this My Farms platform has connectivity with the Field to Market and the field print calculator that Michelle had mentioned. And the result is that, excuse me. Excuse me, I just need to drink some water here. The result is that we get these data sets. Sorry, I was just talking so fast, I think my tongue got away with me. We get these metrics and these results, and what you're seeing here is 3 different growers out of the 5 growers that we work with. And this is a spidergram representing their performance, if you will. And each one of those is different metrics, and it's helping us to inform where they sit in this spectrum of performance. And I've had permission with all my growers to be able to share this as long as it's anonymized because that's important trust that we have between us. But what you can see here is that the dots represent both a state and a national benchmark. And if the green area is inside those dots, then that means that we're doing well, that we're performing better than sort of the state and national averages. But I want to introduce Rod here. Maybe just Rod, if you want to share more about the Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture and what goes into the thinking in a tool like this. It's some pretty impressive work.
Yeah, thanks, Rowan. Appreciate the opportunity to talk for a moment about it. So just a little bit of background. Field to Market is a nonprofit, multi-stakeholder alliance, more than 140 companies and organizations across the food and ag supply chain in the United States. Cotton being one of about a dozen crops that we work with here in the U.S. And really the premise when we got started was that lots of companies, organizations are asking more and more about sustainability, and a lot of consumers are asking more and more about sustainability. But how we define that really matters. And being able to look at it through a science-based lens, through metrics that are meaningful to consumers, but also to growers, felt really important to us. And so how do we translate really complex agronomic decisions at a farm level into some science-based outcomes that could also be reported within supply chains or to consumers within storytelling, et cetera. And so what's really exciting about the work that Wrangler is doing is that they're really focused on a handful of practices that can help drive the needle on multiple outcomes. And there are benefits, corollary benefits that come with no-till, with cover crops, with complex rotations that span from soil carbon and water quality and water infiltration and erosion. A lot of and greenhouse gases. There are 8 different outcomes that are measured within Field to Market's program, and the practices that Wrangler has selected touch most of them. And so it's really exciting to see a brand like Wrangler dive into the science and work with growers on some practical application, and then to be able to measure these results. And we do have a pretty complicated or a pretty robust process across our membership for how we establish these metrics. We basically come to an agreement on how we're measuring these things. We have peer-reviewed science that must go into determining exactly how much greenhouse gas emissions are estimated for various practices. We also use USDA and NRCS tools when it comes to things like soil erosion. We look at irrigation efficiency estimates. A lot of process goes into the background that then is translated into our data tool, the FieldPrint platform, that brings to life those metrics at a field scale. And so what you're seeing here on this screen are really the results of 3 different farmers. And what you want is a shrinking footprint. So you have less environmental impact per unit of production, in this case, cotton. And as Rowan pointed out, all of these growers are doing a really great job. They're performing it better than the state and national average. And we also talk about a journey of continuous improvement and how, as producers think about more and more ways to innovate, as they think about different conservation practices that they can adopt moving forward, you can actually measure the improved performance at a field scale, and then also roll all that up in the aggregate, which can help tell a story about Wrangler's supply chain, for example, or any other company that's participating in the program. And so bringing science and data to life in a meaningful way, not only to the farmer, but also to the supply chain partners as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Rod. You really encapsulated that very well, and that's exactly why I invited you to the call because there's so much that goes behind these visualizations that it's really an impressive process, and it's one reason that we continue to be a member of Field to Market and see it as a valuable way to communicate across the supply chain, as Rod said. And Rod said something else that was important: this idea of continuous improvement. We're not claiming that we're going to get it right as a brand all the time, but we're going to have a lot of focused effort. And we're going to have a lot of goodwill behind the initiatives that we do. And, it's what is exciting for us. And after 18 months of working to understand the science and engaging with folks like Steve and our NRCS team, and getting to those benchmarks, and then meeting growers and actually practically talking about what works, what doesn't work, and you saw the results of the field print calculator there. We decided to put this up into product. And so just last week on Thursday, we launched the first 2 states of our collection with those I mentioned, the 5 growers. We launched our Texas and Alabama gene in something that we call the Rooted collection. And we're really excited about this because this is storytelling. This is the opportunity to articulate a grower story, a grower commitment to being a good land steward. Each of those growers, as you saw, is using cover crops in their own form or fashion. We didn't specify what type. We're not claiming to be agricultural experts. We're really using this as an opportunity to tell a positive and meaningful story about U.S. cotton growers that are doing an incredible amount of work on farm every day. And so this is a fully traceable program that the cotton that goes into that gene, and you can kind of see if you can squint, there's a little Texas state silhouette on the Wrangler patch there. There's all kinds of what we call surprise and delight trims involved with this, including on the inner pocket. We have a signature of the grower certifying that this cotton came from his farm, is proud of the way that they produce it in a responsible and sustainable way. We're putting this product, it's up on our website now. There's a connectivity to our social media, and there's a grower story. There's actually a video for each grower or grower family that kind of describes where they're from and what they're about. So we're really excited about it. This is one part of our journey and continuous improvement in terms of trying to demonstrate our commitment going forward. If you go to the microsite there, North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee will be the states that follow come July 4th. We kind of staggered our launch here, wanted to get some out for Earth Day and get some out around the July 4th weekend. But it is a product that we felt like something so inherently trying to communicate so much value that we wanted to make this a fully made in the USA product, that we wanted to make sure that it sort of emulated all of the important values that we put into it. And so the individual cotton comes from each of those different states and the farms. It was all sent to a place called Tryon, Georgia, a town called Tryon, Georgia, and a place called Mount Vernon Mills. And then from Mount Vernon Mills, that's where they take the fiber and put it into yarn, and then that yarn up into fabric and make the fabric. The fabric leaves Tryon, Georgia, is actually shipped back to Texas, where it went to El Paso with a small manufacturer there that does cut, sew, and laundry called Excel Manufacturing out of Texas, and then to our distribution facility that's also in Texas. But each one of those states represents a growing family that is using cover crops, conservation tillage, and the rotation. So that's our update. That's what we got for you now. That's sort of where we've been through the past 18 months and sort of where we've arrived with all of our commitments and interests.
Well, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Roian, so good to hear you and Rod, Michelle, and David who joined in. I wasn't expecting that, but that really rounded it out well. And I guess in the spirit of, you said little surprises here and there with even the way your jeans are made, I appreciate your commitment. It just tells me that I've been telling people that Wrangler is for real. And you've even took that up another notch today by bringing some other people in. So now it's your turn. Those who are listening in, now is your chance to ask any questions that you may have. I'm sure there are some. So just unmute yourself. And who has the first question for Roian or any of the other team that's on here today? Anybody?
Well, Steve, this is Dan.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So if I wanted to buy a pair of from the Rooted collection, are they going to be the same price as the other Wrangler jeans?
No. So these are at a premium price today. Well, I mean, other Wrangler jeans. We're a funny brand. We sell sort of what we call the honest working man's jean at $10 a pair through a Walmart distribution, right? And then from all the way to a premium premium market play, there you can buy a selvage pair of denim jeans for $224. I would never buy that myself. There's people out there that will. Now, it's how the value is conveyed that goes up and down that distribution from $10 to $224. What is the difference between that? There's quite a bit actually. There's the actual physical makeup and the amount of time and energy that goes into the design and the style. Sometimes, now this is hard for me to say sometimes, and maybe hard for you to hear, but there's this trend that's been going on where it's an increasing synthetic trend where they've been adding spandex and polyester to jeans. What was largely a 100% cotton category has really been influenced by yoga pants, brands like Lululemon, Under Armour, and we've had to be responsive to that, and yet at the same time think forward in the future about, what does this mean for our overall composition makeup. So what was used to be 100% cotton is now moving to about 80% cotton. That's about the max we would want to go with synthetic content. But some of the innovation and design projects that I have on my plate is like, well, what would it take if we could actually use, corn-based polyester and continue to support those growers that are doing this effort and broaden our initiatives. We've been very interested in the American hemp revival and what that means for growers that can have a new crop to produce, and a lot of tobacco growers in Kentucky that are looking at that. And there's a processor out there that we're working with on a project. And I was even just in South Dakota recently where they were saying that flax is pretty common in that geography, or has the potential to be common in that geography, and I think that extends all the way up into Canada. So we're really thinking, while cotton is our primary input, and I don't want to deviate from your question because I want to circle back to it, how do we continue to be inspired by nature, to have this, all of this, just the land stewardship connected to everything that we do, and maybe there's a future for plant-based indigo, but all of that requires a certain amount of R&D and investment. The cost of this is what we consider a premium play. The Rooted collection is a $99 pair of jeans. But you can see, if you go through the website, all of the design elements that show up on that jean are intended to really sing, pop. They're intended to sort of demonstrate state pride. And every time we do that, we add cost. We add cost because we're doing these customized embellishments and printings and that type of thing. But our future vision of this is the premium expression as a way to communicate with consumers. And Steve and I were talking this right before we joined the call, is how do we then take this idea of sourcing sustainable cotton and this connectivity to grower and bring it even into the $10 pair of jeans? Because the sustainable attribute someone should not be choosing between, can I afford this, and do I want to be able to support this type of activity and practice? That's not a fair choice. That ultimately we had to do this at a premium level to be able to make a proof point in the market. But now my next job, and over the next 18 months, I'm going to be trying to figure out how to scale back that cost and bring it into sort of what we would consider more of an everyday jean. That's part of our charge, and people know we're actively working on that. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of different factors and commercial factors that I'm going to have to navigate in order to be able to do that.
Good. Well, Dan, you can buy at least one pair for that. I mean, come on.
I know, but
this is a movement.
Do I have to go to Texas to do that?
I think you can go to the comfort of your office, actually. You can order right online. But
okay.
Well, I guess that does lead into another question, Rowan, and I know people are thinking it, and we need to address this because what does a farmer get out of this? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that, so first of all, it's early. We're still figuring it out, but I think we recognize that typically, I mean, let's just be totally transparent, that supply chains are not kind to our businesses, right? That ultimately, when the price of cotton dips, that somehow improves the margin of apparel. When it goes high, it decreases the margin of apparel. And it's the commodities market is not always it's just not kind to the various different actors. What is a way to improve on that process? I'm not sure we know yet. I'm not sure that we we quite have an answer to that. I do know that, if we were to articulate a value proposition where we were to, pay extra for cotton, within our supply chain and to the growers, that fundamentally wouldn't be popular from sort of a brand leadership or cost of goods perspective on our side of the business. So we've had to stop and say, well, okay, well, what if we can't do that? Then what are we going to do? What does that mean? What can we pay for, or how can we extend value back? And that's where we've been wanting to, and this is the direction that we're headed, is maybe we can't pay an extra premium for sustainable practices in cotton growing. Let's face it, no one necessarily pays us as a denim manufacturer for having enhanced wastewater treatment at our manufacturing plant, that these things are ultimately becoming sort of expectations. But that still doesn't feel right. There still needs to be some sort of market mechanism to extend throughout the supply chain. Maybe the solution is, let's pay for data, that we recognize there's an amount of time required to engage with us and to put data into the platform, that there's an exchange, a value exchange that is based upon the sharing of information as opposed to the actual practice. So it's not a per pound sort of commodity type pricing situation, but let's at least demonstrate our commercial mechanism back in compensating for exchange of data, because there's value in that. Now, again, anonymous, keep that autonomy, but we need to be able to roll that up so we can report to various different stakeholders that we're doing a good job. And other ways too, maybe it's not necessarily just this single once a year trying to sell your products into market and cross your fingers, hope that it works, that maybe it's a multi-year relationship, and that we have a 5-year commitment to working with you, and that there's a home for the cotton, meeting the quality specs that we need. So these are all the different sort of things that we're engaging. And then the software is an investment that we've made, and we don't charge our growers for that. That's something that we've made available to them as a way, and they can use that to communicate not just to us, but they can also, that's their field print calculator. That's their field print sort of results. So they can use that to make strategic choices on farm, but they can also use it to market their cotton to other folks as well. So we think there's additional value extension there. So it's not an easy answer. Naturally, I would love to be able to say, hey, we pay a premium per pound of cotton. But as the market exists right now and the way it's structured, it doesn't allow us to do that very well at all. Now, it's not to say that there won't be a market of the future, and I hope that we're a part of building a market of the future. But we've had to be very creative on how we're going to demonstrate our desire for these practices, and how we'll ultimately create value back for the growers that choose to participate with us. And I guess the last part is just an opportunity to tell a story if there is value in that. If our 5 growers have found it really rewarding to come out, to be able to share their story of how they farm and who they are as a family, and put that, and it might not appeal to everyone, I recognize. I mean, if I was in agriculture, I might just be that lone wolf who never talks to anybody except for Steve. I jump on these calls. But I think that for these guys, they really felt like that, they're active, they participate in the cotton industry and the cotton board, but they think it's really important that we change the narrative around how agricultural producers interact with the world, and to them, this has been a good platform for that.
Yeah.
So
good. Okay, other questions? Jen?
Yeah, I think that same kind of question comes up a lot in terms of crop advisors. Like, what is their role in this process, and is there any incentive for them to participate in this as well?
yes, that's a great question. I'm not sure I have an answer to that. I don't know. I mean, so far, I think, we've just simply looked towards the leading practitioners, the leading growers that use all of their existing crop advisors, and that have received that guidance sort of as what is now their business as usual. I recognize that, if you're working with a grower that doesn't have as tightly of a clustered field print in that spidergram, that, there could be a potential way to help a lower performing farmer, please excuse my language there, but a grower that's maybe struggling to adopt practices and not having as much success or has had challenges. There might be a way to create a mechanism to involve the advisors to help accelerate that trajectory. Steve, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, no, I saw Michelle had turned her mic on. Michelle, did you have something to add to that? Because in a way, you kind of play that role a little bit. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, at the very least, we'll reach out to those crop advisors and make sure they know when those cover crop field days are happening. And it's been a while since we've really done a big outreach push on heavy rye cover crops. I mean, lots of folks know they work well, but we're going to need the crop advisors to understand what's going on in the field just as much as the farmer, because they are one of the key trusted sources that farmers turn to get advice in North Carolina. And I just would say, I don't know, David, if from a cotton producer standpoint and how they interact with the crop advisors, if you have any comments. I just know across our programs we've seen that need to engage with them to make sure they know what's going on and that they're at the field days. And then from there we'll see where it makes sense to plug them in.
David, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I would just say specifically regarding this project, I mean, part of the intent was to just to demonstrate it as we said at the on-farm level, and hopefully that would as Michelle just said at some of our field days, we certainly have a lot of crop consultants that come and we like working with consultants because you work with one consultant, it's like working with 10 or 12, 15 different farmers. So we're hoping that the farmers that we're working with on this specific project with Wrangler, they're leaders in the industry, they're involved, and hopefully that will, I guess, translate into others seeing it and seeing the practice and the the science that goes along with it and implementing it across other farms. I mean, I hope that's the end result anyway.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up to that. Some of those comments, from my vantage point, I've come to realize that those who advise farmers are maybe sometimes harder to convince of the benefits of cover crops and soil health because it has to work for them. They can't have what should I say? They got to work, because if they're giving advice and they're not convinced that farmer can pull it off or knows what he's doing in a relatively new topic, you might say, with cover crops, they're not apt to promote it. So that's one of the things that I've been trying to focus on more now, is to train the trainers, so to speak, and to help them become more confident in this. And so I actually think, Rowan, what you've done with Wrangler, I think that's going to turn some heads when they're like, wow, Wrangler Jeans is into this. I better get on the bandwagon here. I better learn how to do this. And that in turn could incentivize some of these crop advisors to do that. So I hope that discussion is helpful there, Jen, to answer that. So Lauren, do you have a comment? Lauren from Iowa.
First of all, I want to applaud Wrangler for what they're doing. I appreciate it. The question I'm going to have, are you looking at aligning with some of the other entities that are coming on board now, trying to work with farmers direct? Indigo Ag is kind of one that's after a lot of us farmers. FBN is talking, doing something. What I'm asking is more for the other crop mixes and that stuff.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, we've been in a couple conversations with Indigo Ag. We haven't made a decision on that. I'm not entirely. I think their business model is interesting. I'm still trying to understand it, quite frankly. We're very well connected to the industry-wide initiative that David was referring to, and I know that Rod has a connectivity to as well. What's called the Trust Protocol in the cotton growing world. Which is a new initiative to create better visibility into on-farm practice. But Yeah, I think that really our big commitments are with the field print calculator and the field to market group. We are working with the Soil Health Institute, which is an organization out of Raleigh, and they're doing some additional training modules that they're building, and they're going to, I believe, 6 or 7 different states. I think that what's interesting is when we start to get into soil health metrics, they identified over 40 different metrics that could potentially be used through one of their working groups, and the question became, well, do we need all 40? I mean, what's most meaningful from a grower perspective? We don't want to overbuild these things, and I think that's one of the beauties of field to market as well, is that we want to have the right metrics. We don't want to necessarily have too many, and we want them to be reliable and usable. And so, we really support that approach. That's pretty much the extent of our reach, but I really appreciate the question, because I have been on calls with Miller Coors and Campbell Soup and different companies just saying, hey, could we work together? Like, is there an overlap here from growers from different regions? Or how can we continue to collaborate? And I think we're definitely open to that. We're still sort of in the early stages of that, and we're open to your persuasion as well. If there's something that we're not doing and should be doing, and there's something that we should be looking at, I think we're all ears, because it's still a learning process for us as well.
As a farmer right now, I appreciate that, because it seems like everybody's grasping for straws, and it'd be nice if the industry all kind of settles on a uniform practice. Can I, as a farmer, go onto the website and enter my data now that that matrix you're using?
Yes, you can. I mean, I think there's a couple different ways to access it, but yes, that is possible. Rod, how would a farmer access the field print calculator today?
Yep, it's free and available to any producer. You just go to fieldtomarket.org and click on a button that says the field print calculator, and you can sign up for a free account there. It allows you to select the exact field that you want to evaluate. You use a little bit of like a drawing tool to select your field, so the data is specific to the soil and slope and whatnot of that specific field. Yeah, you can do that all through our website and get the exact same type of spidergram report out that Rowan showed on these slides.
Thank you.
I know what you'll be doing this afternoon, Lauren.
Well, hopefully it rains more to play with that, but that sounds very similar. I'm curious what we did the interview with Indigo Ag a week or two ago, and that's why this has really intrigued me. It's like, okay, they're coming at it from one direction. I'm hearing grounded growth is another one to watch, but I'm just trying to figure out where do I as a farmer jump in at, and at what point.
And I'll just let me just clarify one thing. Indigo is certainly a great program. Field to Market as a nonprofit is a little bit different in that we're trying to provide these science-based tools to producers free of charge. It's not connected to any other product or service. You don't have to buy it. We're basically a pre-competitive tool that lots of different companies can use or take advantage of. So that is one distinction. Not to say that it's a either or choice between Indigo Ag or what we're doing. It's just that we're positioned a little bit differently. We're not trying to make money off of this. We're just trying to advance the sustainability conversation here in the U.S.
And that's what I appreciate, what I hear today, because I'll be honest, Indigo sounds like they're grasping for straws. I mean, they heard a lot of words here they never heard before, and we had to explain a lot. They want to go read the bag, but I don't know if they really have a clue what they're after, and it'd be nice if we have a universal, come at it with a universal approach right off the bat.
Yeah, that's a good point, because one of the reasons that Wrangler joined Field to Market was because of the over 100 different members. Now, it's commercially related, but all the different brands and mostly food companies. We were actually the first apparel company to join. But all the different food companies and support companies, BASF is a member, Cargill, Bunge, that were involved in field to market. We thought that there was value, to your point, that there was value in joining with a platform that most people were focused on, rallied around, and ultimately supporting, because we didn't want to create our own thing as opposed to join with the leaders. Yeah.
Well, just to follow up with that, maybe a question for Rod here. That's fascinating to know this. I have known a little bit about field to market, but not the dynamics. So it sounds like you have cobbled together a bunch of significant companies, and I'm just curious, how this could all, to Lauren's point, I think that's what Lauren was going after. Let's work at this together, and all the dynamics of agriculture, from apparel to camel soup to what have you.
I think that is the key here, is that if you look at any crop in isolation, you're missing part of the story, because part of what, with rotations and the decisions the farmers are making, they're not just growing one crop. And so we have 12 major commodities that are often grown in rotation together. We do have modules for corn and soy and peanuts and cotton and rice, and et cetera. So a grower can evaluate all of those within one tool. And in fact, you can even get feedback on how the rotation is affecting these kinds of decisions. So it's all there, and a lot of the major companies in the ag system in the U.S. are already involved. So hopefully it does have fairly broad recognition. And I want to mention one other quick thing. We do work very closely with the Certified Crop Advisor program, with the CCA program in the U.S. They're a member of Field to Market as well. We've developed with them some sustainability specific webinars and online learning modules. We have some specific documents that are tailored towards helping CCAs understand how they can be a part of advising on sustainability. And you can even go so far as to get a specialization in sustainability through the CCA program for people that really want to nerd out on it, entirely. There's a whole test you can take. But we're working very closely with the CCA program, because we do think that crop advisors are a really critical piece of the puzzle, knowing that for many farmers, that is the first place they're turning around all these, they're turning for these kinds of decisions on cover crops and otherwise. So we do have information on our website about that as well, and are happy to follow up with anyone who's interested.
Well, good. Thank you. Thank you, Rod, for explaining that. That's very helpful.
No problem.
Time is winding down, but what other questions does anybody have? Now's your chance. Other questions anybody have for Rowan or anybody else?
I'm just curious, the heavy cotton, how many pounds of rye are we talking about?
You mean the heavy ryegrass or the heavy sugar rye they're planting into?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see, we have 4 test plots. Michelle, help me out here. Yeah.
I don't know if you're still on there, Michelle, but do you have any biomass weights, or how, I guess that's what you're asking, Dan, how heavy are we talking about?
Yeah.
And we don't have that data yet, because this was just our first year we planted, but I'd be happy to share that data back with you guys once we have the results. And I mean, they're out in the field right now collecting samples.
Ah.
But I mean, are you using like 100 pounds of seeding rate?
Seeding rate, okay. Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't have that information right in front of me, but I can follow up and get that information. Unless David Parrish, unless you remember that number, it just, when I looked at my guidance document earlier, I hadn't written that one down.
Okay, good. Any more questions? 1 or 2 more, and we're going to wrap her up here. Other questions for Rowan Wrangler?
Well,
I'll tell you what,
I just have a comment for the group. I've done just very little research into indigo egg. I would make sure and do thorough research.
There you go. Okay. Good to know, Dan. Thanks. Dave, you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up. I was trying to get off mute. But for our project here in North Carolina with the heavy rye, our specialists, our NC State specialists that are working with this that Rachel mentioned, Dr. Collins, they were recommending 90 pounds here in North Carolina, 90 pound seed rate per acre.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for joining today. And thank you, Rowan and Rod, Michelle, David is also tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I think, as farmers, appreciate what you're doing, because I can see this is more than just cotton. I don't know if there's any cotton farmers on this webinar today, but it does have implications to any crop that we grow. I see this from my perch. A lot of us have heard about the General Mills and how they are behind very, very similar type strategies and efforts and so forth. And you mentioned Camel Soup and other companies. So we thank you for what you're doing. I'll speak as a farmer here. Thanks for what Wrangler's doing. Keep up the good work. Let's work at this together and make a better planet.
And Steve, next time we get together, I will be checking your jeans to see if you're wearing the rooted collection.
I will try to oblige there for you, Dan. Awesome. Okay. Any closing words, Rowan? Can you top that, Rowan? Any closing words?
Well, I kind of stole the thunder, but no, I appreciate you guys very much. This is when Steve invited us to talk, I said yes, absolutely. There's no place I'd rather be. So really, hats off to all of you. You inspire us, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Stay curious, keep learning. We'll see you all next week.